All right, Environmental Science 20, here we go. We are starting chapter 5, which actually starts on page 132. Unit 3, you'll see on page 126. The unit is Sustainable Agriculture and Forestry. So we are looking at agriculture and forestry specifically. There are some essential science background material there that I'll let you read on your own. We're talking about food product processing, we're talking about farms and things like that. Soil formation and things like that before we get into actual 5.1 material. I'm going to skip that for now, but you should read that, page 126 to 131. And so let's fill in our notes. You all have the blank notes in front of you. If you lose your notes, you can go to mrmathwell.com, find your Environmental Science 20 class, print off your notes from home. You can also look at this video when it's done and posted, and you can also access the display notes. They are up on the website as well if you want to look off those display notes and fill in your blanks. The notes package, again, will be worth marks completed at the end of the units. You can hand those in. I'll give you some marks for finishing your notes, doing your homework. All right, so 5.1. We are talking about, in section 5.1, sustainable food production. Where does our food come from? If you asked some people, I'm sure they would just say from the store. I go down to the store, that's where the food comes from. But if you think a little bit more deeply, food comes from lots of different places. How many of you have a garden? A garden? Yeah? You guys like gardening? Anybody like gardening a little bit? Okay. I like eating food from the garden. I don't like weeding. I like the food. Yeah, we have a bit of a garden. My wife grows a lot of tomatoes, which is like the only food in the world that I really don't like.
I don't like tomatoes.
And she grows a ton of them. I don't know why. I don't know. She likes them. But so yeah, we have a garden. But obviously, all food just does not come from the store, right? Many people in developed countries and live in cities don't have first-hand appreciation for where our food actually comes from. Our food comes from prairie fields. So think about grain that is harvested on the prairie fields. Comes from lakes, the fish and aqua-based food. Oceans, some of the fish come from there as well. Feedlots. That is, we'll talk a little bit more about those, but kind of larger industrial scale places where they grow, grow cattle and pigs and chickens and whatever in larger scales. And orchards, okay, where they pick fruit from the trees and orchards. So it comes from a lot of different places, not just from the store. It's a picture of a cattle feedlot. Okay, so it basically just a large scale production of food from animals. So, basic requirements for plants. Okay, the basic requirements for plants. Plants need light, okay, typically sunlight, but plants can be grown under artificial light. Plants need light, gases from the atmosphere. That's interesting. Hey, what's one main gas in the air?
Oxygen.
Very good, oxygen. They need water, they need nutrients and minerals from the soil, and they need space to survive in their environment. So those are some of the basic needs of plants. Soil is composed of mineral grains, so little bits of minerals. Air, there are air pockets in the soil as well, even though it seems pretty dense and packed, there's pockets of air in there. Water, organic material, that can support the plant life. So let's take a closer look at what the soil profile might look like. So a soil profile is a series of horizontal layers that are in the soil here. And this is a picture that's very similar to the one in your book. I don't have the exact one, but this one's pretty similar. So the topmost layer is called surface litter. So litter is the word we use for garbage and stuff, right? Surface litter would be organic garbage that kind of gets, thrown about, leaves and different twigs and things like that. Composed mainly of loose organic material that may be already partially decomposed. So if you think about the fall, we're in the fall now, think about leaves. If they get wet and decompose and break down a little bit, you look real close, you have, your let's say your grass is starting to brown, but you have like dirt, but on top of that you have like little bits of leaf and organic litter. Okay, so organic litter is the topmost layer. The second layer is topsoil. This is a dark colored layer with large amounts of organic matter mixed with minerals. Okay. The third layer is subsoil. This layer contains less organic matter and fewer organisms than topsoil. It accumulates nutrients leached from the topsoil. So nutrients that come out of the topsoil kind of collect in this area. Humus. Humus is organic material resulting from the breakdown of plant and animal remains. Are we missing something there?
Two blanks.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go. 3 blanks. The fourth layer is rock particles, which contains no organic matter. Is that where we're at? Subsoil? Yeah, bedrock. Yeah, rock particles, yeah. The chemical content of materials in this layer helps determine the pH of the soil. And we'll talk a little bit more about pH. I think maybe we did already, but it's the measure of acidity of the soil. Low pH is very acidic, high pH is very basic. Finally, the fifth layer is called bedrock and is a solid layer of rock. Okay, so when you're building something, you want to make sure you get down to the bedrock. If you're putting piles down or anything that will support the building. A lot of times, structures are just kind of placed on top of the ground, but there's all this soil and looser part that can compact and shift. And if you have a significant layer of real moldable clay, like we do in Regina, a lot of clay in the subsoil, that can be compressed and it can swell as water. It can swell with the water, and it can. So you want to get right down to the bedrock. That's why a lot of houses are drilled down into the bedrock, and there's like steel and cement and stuff that are like the piles, and buildings are built on that so that they don't shift around when the soil changes. Okay, let's go to the next page now. There we go, humus. Organic material for the breakdown of plant and animal remains. Beneath the surface of soil, countless organisms form a network of food chains and open up spaces for air and water to move through the soil. So these little bacteria and protozoa and fungi and all these things here, they move and live and move and eat and poop and all sorts of stuff. And so their trails kind of create small pockets in the soil for air and water to move through. Their remains also, some of them are important in transforming certain nutrients and minerals into other usable things for plants. I think we talked a little bit about that, didn't we, in the nitrogen cycle? Let's talk about soil properties. Okay, porosity. So if something is porous, that means there's spaces or holes in it. So porosity refers to the size and number of spaces among the particles of the soil. Something's very porous, water can move freely through it. pH. As I mentioned before, this is the measure of acidity in the soil. pH above 7 is basic. A pH below 7 is acidic. A pH around 7 is considered neutral. And if you study Chemistry 30, you'll get a lot of info on pH, how it's calculated, what it actually means, and that sort of thing. So I'll just give you a little heads up. The P refers to the negative logarithm. H is the concentration of hydrogen ions. So it's the negative logarithm of the concentration of hydrogen ions in your solution or in your material. And like I say, you'll study a little bit more of that when you get into higher level chemistry and biology. And if you take biochemistry, you get tons of it. Okay. pH determines how easily nutrients can be removed from the soil, which in turn determines what kinds of plants can grow. So the pH scale. Now this is interesting. I don't think this is in your textbook. I pulled this. Just so you have an idea of, like, what do you mean by acidic, Mr. Max? Well, you might know things that taste, like bitter, kind of like, taste like lemon, right? That lemon. Yeah, I wouldn't taste battery acid so much or stomach acid, but this is very, very acidic down here. Lemons, okay? Sodas, tomato, a bit of coffee, milk. Yeah, you can't really. Like, coffee to me is sometimes a bit bitter, that if it's, no cream or whatever, like just straight coffee. Milk and water, I don't know. Blood, I don't know if you drink blood. Water is neutral, yeah, but I mean, in around here, I don't know if you can taste much of a difference. I mean, would you, I don't know. Like stomach tablets, that's like Tums, chalky, that kind of chalky pasty. Ammonium, soap, if you've ever said bad words and your parents wash your mouth out with soap. That's like an old thing. Does that still happen?
My parents did that when I was young.
Your parents did that when you were young? Nice. You have good parents.
Actually, my dad used Tabasco, though, because I really didn't like
Tabasco's good, too. Yeah. I know there was a mom that I knew. We didn't do this, but her kid had a bad habit of biting other kids and other people. So every time the kid bit somebody, she would take a dab of Tabasco sauce and put it on the tongue. So it's kind of like how to learn. So there she goes, some kid's crying, and there's the mom's like chug Tabasco sauce. Anyways, so bleach, oven cleaner, drain cleaner, very basic. And another word for basic is alkaline, but acidic, basic, alkaline, basic. So yeah, pure water is pretty neutral. That's about 7. All right. Page 139 contains a chart detailing plant nutrients and their function. So we've mentioned nutrients a couple times. Let's talk about what nutrients are. Okay, so these are some important nutrients. Elements on the periodic table too, you'll find. Okay, these plant nutrients. Nitrogen gives plants their dark green color. You'll also notice that in I don't know if you've ever paid attention to the contents of fertilizer for grass and stuff. There's always nitrogen. There's nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in there. And nitrogen gives the plants their dark green color, so that'll darken your lawn up, make it a little darker green. Phosphorus helps plants develop root buds and seeds. Root buds and seeds. Potassium builds strength and disease resistance and improves quality of plant seeds. So strength and disease resistance, big one. Magnesium is needed for photosynthesis. Calcium helps develop healthy cell walls, so the cells don't break down and the thing dies from the inside. So these are some important nutrients and their function for plants. This is on page 139. You'll find this chart. It's awesome. It's actually part of one of the review questions for 5.1, but I really liked that chart. So I thought I'd try and give you some of it there. Sorry for the autocorrect there. Okay, so that's section 5.1. Any questions about anything we talked about there? Again, remember, you're reading the textbook on your own to fill in like the little gaps and blanks there, but these are highlights I'm giving you. So a full understanding come with your reading. But let's take a look at section 5.2. So section 5.2, agriculture, the practice of raising plants and livestock for food and other human needs. So when I talk about agriculture, we're talking about farming, okay? That's kind of the most common term that we equate with agriculture, farming. So you raise plants, you grow plants, you raise livestock for food and other things. A monoculture, so if you break this word down, mono means single, or one. That's the growth of a single crop over a large area of land. Repeated monoculture can use up certain nutrients in the soil very quickly. So if you grow the same crop on the same parcel of land year over year, that specific plant is going to pull the same nutrients every year. And so that's why you have a little bit of a rotation of crops or you grow more than one crop at a time. So you will very quickly require fertilizers to supplement the nutrients that have been taken by this one crop year after year. And even a lot of times it's just 1 year the crop pulls so much of one single nutrient or something that you need to kind of make that up. Or you do a crop rotation, which is, if you're strategic about it, this crop, takes away this nutrient, this crop pours that nutrient back into the soil, so it kind of like tops it back up a little bit, and you kind of balance yourself out a little bit. I remember I grew up on the farm, so we took soil samples and found out that, hey, we're low in nitrogen and high in potassium, whatever, and so, sometimes you can kind of tailor the for the land to make sure everything's brought up to where the levels they should be. And sometimes we just try to be careful about what we grew the next year to pour back some nitrogen in the soil or whatever. Make sense? Yeah? Okay. The 3 nutrients that are most often depleted in farmers' fields are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Okay. Now, nitrogen, do you see these chemical formulas here? These are formulas for elements. Do you know which one is nitrogen? Any guesses? N, right here. Which one is phosphorus? P is phosphorus. Which one is potassium?
K.
It is K. Very good. Do you know what, I think it's Latin, what Latin term K is derived from? Why potassium is a K? Carrot? Not quite. Kalium. Kalium or kalium. So the kalium mine outside of Regina, where we live, the kalium, they harvest or mine potassium. Okay, so synthetic fertilizers are important to crop yields around the world, but also fertilizers can have negative effects, specifically on aquatic, that is water-based ecosystems. When an excess of nutrients, sorry, that should be excess, EXCESS, when an excess of nutrients are washed into lakes and rivers. So some of these other ones here, this is calcium, this is magnesium, this is sulfur. So there's lots of things in the soil that the plants need. If you put a little bit too much in the soil that the plants don't all use, or if it's on the surface of the soil where rain often washes the surface material off, then you could quickly you'll lose some of that you put in there, and then an excess amount of these sorts of nutrients in lakes and rivers can have a real negative effect. And we talked about this in the first chapter, didn't we? About algae blooms, right, out in Buffalo Town? Yeah. All right, nothing else on that page. One such contamination involves algae blooms. We'll talk about this some more now. When concentrations of nutrients such as phosphorus and nitrogen become too high in water sources, algae reproduce in large numbers very quickly. And here's a picture of a pea soup, right? Like just pea green, all the algae in the lake. You ever gone camping in the summer around here and you come up to a green lake and you're like, oh, I wanted to go swimming. And it was like so gross.
This summer.
Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, different lakes can be pretty bad at times for sure. So when the algae die, this is how it works. When the algae die, bacteria in the water decompose them. During this process, large amounts of oxygen in the water are used up. Fish and many other aquatic organisms cannot survive without oxygen. So when it's really green, you'll see some dead fish on the wash up at the shore once in a while. And it's not because they don't like green stuff. It's because of the lack of oxygen. So it's not necessarily because they're swimming through sludge and it's not good for their gills. It's the oxygen that this process uses up, so it depletes the oxygen a little bit. And probably they don't like swimming through the soupy stuff, but yeah, interesting. Pesticides. Pesticides are chemicals used to kill or control unwanted populations of fungi, animals, or plants. So anything that's a pest. Could be creepy things, could be weeds, pesticide. Now there's specific pesticides like fungicides, things like that that are a little more targeted. Pesticides can kill organisms unintentionally though, and chemicals from these pesticides can build up over time to negatively affect the environment and us humans as well when we eat things that have these chemicals on them. So here it's a picture of a bit of a fumigation, right? Just kind of walking through these plants. I'm not sure if they're potato plants, or it looks a little more exotic. I don't think it looks like potato plants. I don't know what this is exactly. But, you know, spray pesticide kills all the bugs that are eating the leaves and different things like that. Bugs are a big thing. You know, they eat the leaves through. You've seen plants and trees that have big holes in the leaves and start to die. I know in our yard and in our city sometimes you get those webs, right? You get the webs on the tree. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but like way up high in the tree, sometimes you'll see these webs kind of forming, and it's, you know, these worms that are building this kind of web and eating everything inside, and they'll turn into these big worms, and then, you know, kind of moths, and like, yeah, it's kind of gross, and it totally eats up the tree on the end there that it encompasses. Anybody have that in their yard, or you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Irrigation. All right, what about irrigation? Irrigation is adding water to an agricultural field to increase the yield. Obviously, plants need water in dry areas or in areas that are near rivers or lakes. Sometimes you can pump the water from the river to the nearby fields to really increase the yield. So, yeah, a lot of times that can be done. You're waiting for rain and things like that, but yeah, in some of the areas that are near water sources, irrigation, it's expensive, but can be really worth it. Okay, is this the next paragraph you guys have, GMO?
Yeah.
Genetically modified organisms result from taking one small section of DNA, called a gene, from one organism and inserting it into another organism. This changes its function, changes what it's resistant to or what it can or cannot do. Crops have been genetically modified by inserting a gene from a certain type of bacterium, so bacterial gene, which kills the insects that eat it. So one of the ways that you know, GMO plants have been improved by genetically modifying them. Now we're getting down to, like, you know, cellular level changes, which is a little scary, right? But if they're careful, you insert you know, this section of you know, a gene in there, and then any bugs that eat it die. It's changed just that much. It becomes poisonous to them or whatever. So crops have been genetically modified by inserting a gene from a certain type of bacteria, which kills the insects that eat it. And this is just a generic GMO, you know, image I got from the internet, but you know, you can genetically modify, you know, a plant that maybe doesn't do well in the environment because of bugs or because of lack of nutrients, whatever. If you modify it, you know, it can come out quite differently. Now, a lot of people are not okay with genetically modified foods. It's not natural, right? They say, you've messed around at the cellular level with this thing. How do I know that this is not going to kill me? It's going to kill the bugs that eat it, but it's not going to kill me. You sure? Might it make me sick? What? So, have you guys heard of GMO foods and all that? Yeah? Non-GMO, yeah. Non-GMO is a big thing because they're telling people, hey, we haven't touched this. It's all natural. It's different than organic, right? Like organic, there's no pesticides or herbicides or any kind of chemicals applied to the top. GMO is sort of like at the cellular level. So it's a bit different. Another kind of genetic modification involves herbicide resistance. So remember, pesticide is eliminating pests. Herbicide specific, herbs are plants. So herbicide resistance means that a farmer can spray a herbicide or a deadly chemical to certain plants to kill the weeds, and it won't affect the crop. So normally in a crop like this, what you see here is the golden colored crop would be a ripe crop of some sort, and the big green plants are weeds. It's happened lots. I remember I grew up with a farm and we always had this going on, weeds coming through. So one of the ways that GMO can help this, you can spray this whole crop with herbicide that should kill everything normally, but if you have a GMO crop that has a special resistance to that chemical, then only the weeds will die, and that's what you want. So there's bug resistance, kills the bugs when they eat it, and there's herbicide resistance. A couple examples there. All right, that's the end of section 5.2. Any questions about 5.2? Everybody's feeling okay about what we talked about there? Okay. All right, let's move on. 5.3. Sections aren't that long, are they? Okay. 5.3. Sustainable agriculture is producing food to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. So when we talk about sustainable agriculture, we are trying to help the needs of the present without sacrificing the future. That's what makes it sustainable. It can keep going this way, and it's not going to harm future production or people in the future. One aspect of sustainable agriculture is companion planting. In this practice, 2 or more plant species are planted together so that some benefit occurs. Remember the monoculture we talked about?
Yeah.
So if you plant more than one, one may take a certain nutrient and the other may put that certain nutrient back into the soil. That might be kind of good. Or maybe it's a physical companionship, which we'll talk about. This happens in a polyculture, so monoculture versus polyculture, containing a diversity of crop types. Ancient Aboriginal polyculture practices uses the 3 sisters, corn, beans, and squash. Corn, beans, and squash. So this is an ancient Aboriginal method of polyculture, and you'll see why in a second. The corn provides a good structure, and the corn is the large plant here, obviously. You guys, hopefully you know what corn looks like. The plant's big, tall, right? 6-7 feet tall. Provide a good structure on which the beans can grow up. So beans are kind of like a vine, right? And so if they grab onto something, they can keep growing and grow vertically instead of a mishmash on the ground. The beans return nitrogen to the soil, which benefits the squash. Squash need nitrogen. Beans give nitrogen to the soil. And the squash provides dense leaf cover, or leaf coverage and ground cover, which helps keep weeds from growing and retains moisture in the soil. So in this picture, it's a little tough to tell what's what, but we have the squash with the big leafy, plants there, and we have the beans that grow underneath the shade of some of these leaves and climb up the corn stalk and all that sort of stuff. So you get three plants in one, and they all kind of help each other out a little bit. Yes? Soil conservation involves both reducing soil erosion and maintaining soil fertility. So we talk about soil conservation. We want to protect or conserve the soil. So we want to protect against erosion. So the most common erosion is water erosion, as you see here in the picture. Big rain, it's washed, some of the topsoil away. And so this area is bare from topsoil. It's all been carried away somewhere. To maintain soil fertility so that all of the nutrients and everything is kept intact. So yeah, soil erosion is a big problem. I want to make sure you address that. As mentioned before, crop rotation is the practice of growing different crops at different times on the same land. This is different than a polyculture, which there's more than one crop grown at once. And there are other examples other than the 3 sisters there. But a crop rotation would be one crop one year, another crop another year, another crop another year, and then maybe back to the first one again. Compost is produced when microorganisms in soil break down organic matter in the presence of oxygen. How many of you, some of you put up your hand for having a garden, how many of you have a composter or a compost in your property? Okay, some of you do, yeah. All right, and that's, it depends upon little bugs and microorganisms in the soil to break things down. Mulch is the general term for protective ground cover. How many of you also have a job of mowing the lawns on the weekend? Anybody? Okay, you ever done that? Okay, so if you bag the blades of grass and put them in a bag and garbage them or whatever, take them to the organic recycling, that's one thing. But you could not put the bag on, and then the blades of grass just get cut up a couple times into smaller pieces, and it just rests on the ground. And if you do that, there's some benefits there. You return some of those nutrients to the soil eventually when that breaks down. Also, there's a little bit of retention of the moisture in the soil. But as in the case in my yard, I mulched a lot this year, and there were seeds from neighboring trees that fell, and instead of bagging them and getting rid of those little seeds, when I mulch, I cover them up and give them a nice little place to grow. So I got all these little tree sprouts in my yard. Oh, it's terrible. I had to pick them one by one. Oh, it was gross. But, so something like that, if I would have bagged all that stuff, knowing the seeds were there, I probably should have bagged that. Got rid of the seeds. But, being warm, you want to conserve water, all that sort of stuff. So lots of times I mulch too in my yard. All right, IPM is Integrated Pest Management, IPM. Chemical substances and crop rotation contribute to IPM. So chemical substances or spraying chemicals, crop rotation also. Biological pest control involves introducing organisms that eliminate undesired pests. Okay, hang on. So this link here takes us to this page. So Virginia Tech Library, Integrated Pest Management and Pesticide Safety. So this is some greater detail. I'll put this on the website so you can read up on this. I think I put this in here because I don't think the textbook talks much about it. So Integrated Pest Management. There'll be a link there that you'll be able to follow, and you should read up a little bit on that, okay? All right, another aim of, is this your next paragraph? Another aim? Yeah. Renewable? Another aim of renewable energy agriculture is to reduce the use of fossil fuels and replace them with renewable sources of energy. This is a bit of a common theme here in this class, right? Such as solar power, wind power, or hydropower. So we're talking about renewable energy agriculture. That is a big part of what the goal is there too. All right. So we got enough time here for section 5.4. This is the last section of the chapter. So, was there another part here?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. I bet. An organic product is one that has been produced without the use of synthetic fertilizers or pesticides. So we did talk about organic products a little bit before. So without synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, without hormones, antibiotics, synthetic additives, genetically modified ingredients, or irradiation. Now this is not irrigation, this is irradiation, very different. It's the exposure of radiation for the purpose of killing microorganisms. So irradiation. You can think of it irradiation. Yeah, irradiation. Which, you don't want irradiation. Generally. All right, section 5.4, last section. And then we're done for the day. Meat from cows, hogs, chickens, and other animals is an important source of protein, iron, fats, and other nutrients that give us energy to lead productive lives. Dairy products are also a key source of protein. About 50% of all livestock are raised in confined animal feeding operations, CAFOs. Confined animal feeding operations. Yeah. Desertification, so it's like making something into a desert. Desertification is the conversion of arid and semi-arid lands, okay, so able to produce, at least semi-able, into deserts by inappropriate farming practices or overgrazing. So you can kind of see how this is, there was something growing there, but now it's just, it looks dry and cracked, obviously. But farming practices in these areas need to be very calculated and efficient in order to continue growing something. So arid lands, they do not get a lot of natural rainwater, okay? So very close to desert-like conditions, very dry. CAFOs, back to the confined animal operations there, provide a place where water and food can be easily dispensed and production of livestock is efficient. The disadvantages include large required inputs of energy to keep these places going, enormous amounts of waste that the animals produce, the higher chance of developing and communicating infectious diseases among livestock. So it's a typical hog barn, hog operation, kind of long, low profile, A-frame sort of buildings that you'll see if you drive in, if you drive in the country more than an hour, you'll probably see something from the side of the road, just a long, single story set of buildings, and that would probably be a hog operation. Not as many private people, I think raise hogs like this anymore, but it used to be a little more plentiful back in the day. Now they're just larger and larger commercial operations, but you still might see something. Rotational grazing, mentioned before, confines animals, or I guess we mentioned rotational crop rotations. Rotational grazing confines animals to a small area pasture for a short time before shifting them to a new location. So this can prevent overgrazing. So overgrazing is literally allowing animals to eat too much of the grass or the hay or the produce from the land there at once, and therefore putting it in jeopardy, killing it, ripping it all out, whatever. So if you rotational graze your animals, so here in this picture you see a fence, you see some horses here, they're grazing off this section of land, and then the next fenced off section will be growing that whole time that they're not there, and then they'll move them over and let them graze in this spot, eat that down for a month or whatever, and then move them again. So this can prevent overgrazing by allowing the pasture to replenish itself. Okay. What do we have for time? I've got one more section, guys. Do you want to get through one more section? How many we got? We got 10 more minutes?
7 more minutes.
We have about 7 more minutes. All right, let's see if we can do it. I think we can do it.
Very short.
Aquaculture. Aqua is water. Is the breeding, raising, and harvesting of animals in specifically designed aquatic environments. Here's a picture of some aquaculture. I'm not sure what they're raising here. Maybe lobster or something like that. I'm not sure.
Some sort of crabs.
Could be crabs, yep. Aquaculture is being developed because lakes and oceans are becoming overexploited. This means that the existence of certain aquatic species is threatened due to too much extraction or being taken out. Extract. Too much extraction. Okay, this looks like an aquaculture operation. This guy's got some fish in there. You know, they're growing the fish and then fishing them. It's very controlled. So is that your last little bit of notes there in your notes package? Awesome. Okay, so you got through chapter 5 notes. Good, there will be some activities, there'll be some questions. This is the last part, I believe, as well, so you can write down your text questions on there. On page 160, figure 520 explains different fishing methods. So I'm not going to go over those in the notes today, but different fishing methods you're responsible to study on your own. And the chapter 5 summary is on page 168 and 169. I will point you towards that for your study for chapter 5. And these are the text questions that I will give you next class to work on. Okay? So this is the homework. You can start on that now, and I'll give you probably tomorrow's class to work on that.